Okay, so today would be good to start with an overview of Jola as the company, and I think your background is mainly, you call yourself a mobile data expert, so maybe you can just give us a bit of an insight into the company background and yeah, what you offer.
Okay, expert sounds a bit pretentious, but we do certainly sell lots of mobile data. So Jola started in 2014 and we sold everything. And I guess when 3G became 4G in 2016, that was a really big leap. I think it was almost missed by everybody, but 3G was not really usable for anything apart from email, and then suddenly 4G was 10 times the speed. So we found a big demand from our partners, an increasing demand for mobile data, and so we started to build platforms which enabled resellers to kind of self-service on mobile data, and it kind of went from there. So we now have over 1,000 partners, which are a mixture of resellers, MSPs, and quite a few specialists. So sort of product in product, people that are putting our product into their product and selling it. So push to talk, for example, is a good example of that. And we have, approaching 100,000 SIMs in the market. We're not a traditional IoT. You'll see a lot of the IoT companies talking about millions of SIMs where their ARPU is, the average revenue per unit is, a few pence, whereas we're much more, ARPU's around sort of 10 pounds or thereabouts, which makes it much more of a mobile data company than an IoT company, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, mobile data, the phrase covers, I guess, a multitude of SIMs. So can you give us a bit of a sort of flavor of where within that landscape, where the company's sweet spots are?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because sweet spot is really important to our resellers. There are probably, we have three main categories. There's IoT, which we just covered briefly, which is ARPUs up to around £1. And that's really where you're sending very low amounts of data, receiving low amounts of data, very low ARPUs, but generally hundreds of thousands of units, or potentially hundreds of thousands of units. That's one end of it. At the other end, we've got unlimited data. So people who are using SIMs for lots and lots of data, either for backing up primary connections or primary connections in themselves. And there you're talking about ARPUs around about 20, 25 pounds. And this is that's where which is a bit more of a commodity market. There are lots of people that piling into unlimited. But we still think that the tools we provide in Mobile Manager provide a way of managing those as well. In the middle, I guess, was what I would call where the volume meets the value. That's really where we play best. And this is where these are generally multi-net SIMs. So I'll give an example, a company rolling out petrol stations all the way through Europe. They don't want to have to send an engineer to survey every single site, see which signal they get. And they want a way to be able to manage the different amounts of data used by each different site. So for them, multi-net's perfect because it carries every network. So you can send a device out with one SIM in it, and it picks up the strongest network. If that network goes, then it rehomes to another network. If the strength of signal changes, it does the same thing. And if you want to either avoid a network or choose a particular network because of price or for whatever reason, you can do so. So multi-net SIMs are really our biggest selling product. And for that, we have a number of different suppliers, which includes an eSIM where the product is still a plastic SIM, but it's totally agnostic to the network. There's no network control whatsoever. In effect, we are the MVNO, Jola is the MVNO, and so we control how that SIM is being used. So that's where most of the stuff we work on, most of the big opportunities we work on are in that middle ground, and generally they're multi-net SIMs.
And in terms of what you do, is it purely, I mean, it sounds like you're quite busy with all that, but purely what I'd call the data transport, the network that enables data to either get to a point or you collect it and take somewhere else, or do you get involved at all in the processing of it, at a high level, or do you have partners you work with to, who take that data on board and do this clever stuff with it, or how does that work?
No, our demarcation tends to end at the device. So there was a time where the demarcation ended with the SIM itself, and we provided the SIM and the management platform in Mobile Manager to be able to activate SIMs and cease them and regrade them, anything you wanted to do with the SIM. And then we had a lot of demand from people who wanted devices which were more intelligent. So we partnered with a company called Robustel, and so we've spent a lot of time and money writing new applications onto those. And one example of that would be there's a rollout currently in place for supermarkets to run those new LED signs. Rather than having bits of cards sticking out of your aisles, you've got custom signs, and of course they have to be able to download new software, new messages, and they have to be able to be remotely controlled. And one of the problems that they had was they were having to send engineers out all the time to reboot or to reconfigure applications on those routers. And so we provide them with a completely remote solution where they can run their own applications on the device themselves. But that's really where we stop. So that device is a gateway, and it's a PC, and it's a router. When it comes to things like sensors and device management, that's really down to our partners do that. And we'll have a number of different partners. Generally, they will specialize in particular sectors. So we've got one very successful partner that works in street lighting, and they've partnered, I think, with Mitsubishi on their sensors, and they'll install a sensor into every street light in a particular area. It will record ambient lights and turn the lights on much more scientifically to save money. And the hook there is they're saving the councils thousands of pounds in unnecessary lighting. So that will tend to be their domain. They will either have their own device management system, or they'll use a generic system that I think even Amazon now have a free device management system on AWS Marketplace. But our where we specialize is really in the mobile data transfer. We're a mobile aggregator in that we have relationships with all of the carriers, and we are a carrier in ourselves as well.
And in terms of, we talked, well, you've referenced IoT a few times. I guess a lot of the technology that sort of underpins it existed a while back, but this phrase IoT has come into existence. I mean, do you think it's a helpful sort of category? And also, compared to what's already being done, do you think there is a huge potential, or is it one of those dangerous hype cycles where everyone thinks, oh, IoT is just like big data, everyone piled into that, and then realize that maybe there's a nuances involved? Is IoT the same, or is it just all upside and no pitfalls?
I really hate the term IoT because it doesn't really mean anything. Internet of Things, it was a video, meme years ago, if they existed, and pictures of people controlling their fridges from their office. Who cares, really? It's not. IoT is such a broad category in that it does include. It's not just about the transport, the connectivity, but it's also about devices and as I said earlier, sensors, and it's about truck roll. It's engineers going to site, installing stuff. So. And I think when resellers look at that and MSPs look at that, it's quite complicated and it's quite difficult, and it's quite daunting. And a lot of them are not interested in such very low ARPUs. But that's not where, as I said earlier, that's not really where the market is. The market is much more in a type of transport that resellers are used to. So things like we've just put 30,000 SIMs into ambulances. So that they can look at patient records when they pick a patient up from a house and go to hospital. They can check them out. So that's very interactive, very transfer of data, but also very interesting to research because it needs management. If you're managing 30,000 endpoints, that you can't do that without a very sophisticated software platform in between, which is what we provide. So IoT, I think, is too much of a catch-all, and it's probably the least interesting in sort of pure terms, as in a sim in a bike that you can rent out and then pick up in the evening. That the actual use of the transport, the connectivity there is so low that it's not as interesting to general resellers as it might be to a specialist. So I think when resellers are looking to get into mobile data, they're much more interested in actual applications that they can control the whole end-to-end experience of, and that's really where we're interested as well.
I have to ask, because I more or less ask everyone, the pandemic, which we've all got our own views, I'm sure, but in terms of the impact on business, have you noticed massive new mobile data, I guess, is quite important with hybrid workforce, sat at home, all that. So have you noticed significant sort of uptake in the sort of things you're offering, and your channel companies coming to you saying we need to do this and that, or is it just that it was already happening and it's just sort of maybe accelerated in terms of its uptake?
It's really accelerated it, and that again, like most of these questions, the answer is more complex, because we had our best ever year last year. We doubled our EBITDA last year, and some of that was because of this acceleration of hybrid working, or what I call Sales 2.0, where and it changed the way that we do business, and some of that is for the good. Some of it was specific COVID projects, which whilst at the time, they were interesting and we won a number of them. Things like the education projects where you're sending laptops out to underprivileged kids. That's great. But the reality is that when they're back at school, those will go. And whilst I'm sure you won't get the laptops back, certainly the government are going to stop paying for the data, because actually what we found was the ones that we did send out, they were very, very low usage, because they were what we call whitelisted, which means that the kids could only access certain sites. And of course, they want to access more sites than just the sort of stuff that you get on school. I won't go into detail. But as soon as they found that these things do Wi-Fi, they stopped using the SIM. So we found those SIMs starting to be cancelled, and so that effect was very temporary. Going forward, it's made a huge difference. Not so much in things like home working, but just causing resellers to pivot into new things. Most of the guys that we have also sell things like Ethernet and broadband. And of course, when OpenReach stopped going out to site, they had nothing to sell. And initially, quite a few of our resellers started to furlough people. But we were saying to them, look, don't do that. How about looking at your customers and finding some stuff that you can do, like 4G. And we had an amazing reaction. I mean, I think the first webinar we did on this, where we normally get probably 50, 60 people, we got about 400 people coming onto it, interested in how they could keep going and how they could keep looking for opportunities. And, real credit to the flexibility and initiative of this channel is that they found some fantastic deals. We had one guy who doubled the size of his business. He found a deal in a company that he was already supplying broadband to, and they need 10,000 SIMs for buses, and he convinced them to switch them all to him, and the effect of that was not just to double his revenue, but quadruple the value of his business, because this in mobile data, The last deal in mobile data was 28 times EBITDA valuation. Whereas, if you're selling calls and lines, you're lucky to get 8 or 10. So if you can change the mix of your business, make yourself look more like a mobile data company and less like a calls and lines business, you're not just providing a new line of business for your own company, you're increasing the value of the business overall.
And you referenced 4G there, but the world is, well, again, we're back to hype maybe a bit, but 5G is out there and coming soon, or is here. I don't know. There's lots of sort of contradictory messages. What do you see as its, the reality and the potential? I guess cutting through all the what everyone's saying. I mean, where I live in rural Wiltshire, I'm lucky to get 4G, let alone 5G. So I suspect I'll be bottom of the next queue. But what's the reality in terms of where is it being used mainly in buildings, in sort of the enterprise rather than just being rolled out across the country, etc. What do you see?
Well, the reality is there's more 4G advanced and 5G out there than people even know about. So there's been a little bit of a moratorium on 5G with the debacle over Huawei. They didn't only have to withdraw their network equipment. They also had to. Well, I think they chose to withdraw completely from the CPE market, and they then offered to sell their chips. They're the only guys that had 5G chips at that time, and they offered to sell those into other equipment manufacturers, and basically they were refused. So the rest of the market were catching up with 5G chips. They've now caught up, but in the interim, there's a new speed, if you like, or a new product which is called 4G Advanced or 4G Plus, where you can get speeds up to 300 meg down. And it's much more prevalent. And the reason that you don't see much of this is because the only thing you can get them on is these fellas. The only none of the 4G routers will run 4G advanced or 5G. So people are buying these 4G routers thinking, oh, I've heard about this new 4G where I can get 300 meg. Oh, it probably isn't in my area. Well, actually, it probably is in your area, but you haven't got a Cat6 router. So there's a big misunderstanding about the way these things work. We've just ordered a whole bunch of Cat6 and 5G routers. They've only just got CE approval, so they're only just coming into the country now. So, and we ordered 50 just to start with, and they've all gone like in a week. We just this morning ordered another 50, and we've just tried to back order a huge batch because the demand for them, because the 5G is like, I think it's Cat 16 or Cat 20. It covers the whole spectrum of different speeds. So if you're looking right now at a rollout which involves routers, you probably should be looking at getting a Cat 6 or a 5G router rather than rolling out some of the cheaper just standard 4G routers, because when you want to up the speed, or if you want, there are more benefits to 5G clearly than just speed. But when you want to go 5G, you will need to change that router. You won't be able to just download a different firmware to it. And people are starting to realize that, and they're starting to order these. So to answer your question, the next real bump is going to be in 5G routers. And people balk at spending 400 quid on a 5G router. They're happy to spend 1,200 quid on getting a new iPhone. But that's going to change when you can suddenly get speeds up to, I suppose the 5G stuff that we do have out there, I think we have got thousands of people running 5G because we still do provide SIMs to the corporate world to go in their handsets. They're getting speeds up to 1 gig in some places, which on a phone is incredible. And so I think that will be the next really interesting rollout, which will be 5G routers and Cat6 routers.
And do you have any sort of idea on the time? Because as you say, as I understand it, 4G, as you say, you can't just upgrade the software. It's ripping out all the hardware kit, and so it's quite a major investment and or obstacle. But do you have any idea over the sort? Is it we talking next 5-10 years? How long before 5G becomes the next de facto standard?
It's going to happen a lot quicker than that. I think the way that the government have managed the 5G spectrum sales and some of the conditions around the implementation is a lot more intelligent than they have done before. They've insisted on co-location and mask sharing, that sort of thing. So I think, as I say, I think 5G is actually right now more prevalent than people think. And there are only certain handsets, even if you've got an iPhone. I think if you've got an iPhone X, you can't get 5G, but if you've got an iPhone 12, you can. So people are going to start to see 5G pop up on their phone when they refresh their hardware in areas where they didn't think they could get it before. That isn't to say that it's fully rolled out. It certainly is by no means ubiquitous, but certainly with the right equipment, you can get some pretty decent speeds. I say 4G advanced, 4G plus, I think some people call it. 300 meg down, that's more than most people get at home. So the timing on that is now, and the restriction, or rather what has been holding us back has been the 5G chips, which have so far only been available for handsets, and now they have started to become available for routers. The downside is they're costing retail around about 500 quid. But as with anything, as the volume increases, so we're going to see that chipset cost plummet, and you're going to be seeing 5G routers, Cat 16, Cat 20 routers being sold for a couple of hundred quid, I think, within a year.
And just you mentioned chips, I guess we think of the supply chain problems at the moment. Do you have any knowledge or handle on whether 5G is going to be a slight victim to that situation, or do you...
Yeah, it is, but we're hoping this is going to be a temporary situation. I mean, we took the decision when we went into lockdown to pre-order a whole bunch of SIMs and a whole bunch of equipment and routers. I'm glad we did, because there are shortages, but it is isolated to certain types of equipment and certain chipsets. We're lucky in that we don't have a problem in getting hold of. We sell a lot and thousands of Robusta routers, and so far, touch wood, we haven't had an issue with sourcing them. But with them, we have to order early, take a bit of a punt, and take a bit of a risk, because obviously if we buy hundreds or thousands of routers, and they don't sell as quickly as we thought, and then the price plummets because finally the volume kicks in, then we're going to be stuck with underwater with a few. But that's what it's like to be a wholesaler. You have to take those chances. What you don't want to ever do is run out of the stock.
We covered quite a lot of the sort of technology stuff. Are there any other topics, issues on the horizon, or have we covered the main ones?
One of the areas we're seeing a lot, I mean, LP-WAN, I suppose, is one which is which is a kind of a derivative of IoT, but it's very, very low usage, and it's long battery life. So it's you need something that is going to be sort of a 10-year life cycle. That's something which at the moment only really Voda and O2 do in the UK, but I think so that's going to be quite a big thing in the next few years. But again, it's quite, from a reseller point of view, it's not as interesting because it's very low ARPU. If they can build a business around that, which is providing devices and management, I think those early movers are going to make a huge amount of money, because it's a technology that is not really well adopted yet, but there is a big demand for things like tracking devices. I can't think of anything else. Tracking devices. So that's one thing. An area where we've been working very hard to develop a product. We launched a product a year ago, which is a layer 2 product, which didn't have all the bells and whistles it needed to for most of the ISP customers that we have. We've now relaunched that as a fully featured layer 2 product. And what I mean by that is it means that if you want to run a seamless backup product onto a alongside a fixed product like Ethernet or any form of broadband, it means all the IP addresses will go with you. It's an unaddressed product. We don't provide the IP for that. So that has become a really popular product, but in a bit of a niche. So you need to have an AS number. You need to be running your own network for that to be interesting. As a general point, I think the whole use of 4G, 5G as a backup and a primary, that whole dynamic has changed considerably. We did the rollout we did for the petroleum company. We found that in some countries where they had expected it to be a secondary, a backup, it then became the primary because the speed of 4G in that country had overtaken the rollout of fixed line. So you're starting to see a real change in the landscape of how people are using these products. And so I think if companies are getting in, they should get into looking at providing as a backup initially, and they'll see that it will gradually start to take over primary in many instances. And with multinet, of course, you can then even put 2 SIMs into the same router and provide yourself with belt and braces. You know, you've got a primary, maybe a local SIM, which is picking up, doing all the heavy lifting in terms of data load. And if that were to fail, it fails over to a multinet SIM, which will pick up the strongest signal.
And in terms of a bit of advice for sort of channel companies, what sort of things, I mean, should they be looking for, I guess, both in terms of the technology offerings around mobile data? You've obviously explained a lot of them. And I guess also what sort of backup and support, because that's can be a critical issue as well, can't it? It's all good and well to sell product, but then if there are issues or there's the ongoing maintenance and stuff, you know, what does a company like yourself offer? So I guess, yeah, some advice to people when they're evaluating mobile data opportunities, working with people like yourself. What do they need to see?
Well, there are 3 types of reseller, I suppose. There are people that have got a base that have never tried mobile data. There are people that have been in mobile as dealers and been paid a commission. And there are those that have dabbled with it and probably it hasn't gone so well. And we really address all those 3 markets. At the core of it, the one thing I would say, if the company you're working with does not have a proper self-service management platform like we have Mobile Manager, you don't do it. It won't work. Try to manage thousands of SIMs without, you know, because in the old way of doing it was you'd send an email to whoever the carrier, the MNO is, and then, you know, a couple of days later the SIM would go live, and then at the end of the month you get a bill. And if you went over your allowance, you get a really big bill. Don't do that, and don't work with intermediaries that don't provide you with real-time access and real-time data, because you will come a cropper. Late data is notorious in this market, and you need a company that protects you against that. Yeah, because if you roam out of area, if you roam into an expensive area, it can usually that liability is on you. If you go over your allowance, some people are charging you 30 times what you paid in the first place. You're paying £10 for £10 a meg or whatever, £10 a gig rather. Then suddenly you're paying 300 quid. So whoever you choose to do this, they must be able to give you a real-time API-driven management platform, or they're not really serious in this business. Some of the guys that are doing primarily IoT will not see it as important because it's very low data usage and it doesn't often go over. You know, it's very predictable. And at the other end, if you're sending unlimited SIMs, it's not as important either, because, you know, it's unlimited. I think you still, even if with unlimited SIMs, you still want to know where those SIMs are and what they're being used for, because, you know, quite a lot of these unlimited SIMs are being used for fraud these days. And if you can't pick that up, you are liable as a reseller. So again, although it'll be sold as it's unlimited, who cares? You should care, because it's your liability if they get stuck into gateways or servers and suddenly being used to send out Hermes spam texts, or you know, the more and more prevalent fraud things these days. So the number one thing is you must have a mobile platform to use, and you should really be looking to use an aggregator, someone who has access to all of the networks, and not just all the networks, but all the different types of product, multi-net, LP-WAN, unlimited. Because you're going to have customers that will want to use all of those, and they will want to often use them within the same deployment. But the number one bit of advice is get into it, start doing it. What we learned from last year with the COVID was there are companies here that thought that never sold mobile data before, that thought it was too hard to bill or too hard to support. Mobile is easy to support. You know, we put on 50,000 new SIMs in the first 3 months of this year. We've added, I think, one person on our support desk. You know, SIMs don't tend to go wrong. And when networks go wrong, I mean, when you remember O2 went down for 3 days a couple of years ago, and at that time we had about 4,000 O2 SIMs out in the marketplace. We didn't get a single call, because, you know, the BBC were doing our job for us. They were saying, look, you know, O2's network's down. So there's no, you know, they're not going to ring up the reseller and say, hey, you know, do you know your O2 network's down? Yes. So actually they're very easy to support. I think what you really want from your aggregator, mobile data supplier, is someone who can help you find this stuff, someone who has experience across. I mean, we have, you know, tens of thousands of end customers, and I think we understand, you know, why they're buying. We understand what it takes to win that deal against the MNOs. So I think you want somebody who can help you find those deals. You want somebody who can help you differentiate your product, because you don't want to be squeezed. You know, the last minute you're bidding against one of the networks, and they cut their price to try and keep the business. You want a supplier that can say, well, here's something different. You know, here's a router to go with this, which eliminates the need to send an engineer out. The networks can't do that. Here's a SIM that gives you not just Voda and O2 and 3, and it gives you 450 networks in other countries. You know, these guys can't do that. So you need a supplier that can give you a product that is different to the one you're competing against.
And in terms of the opportunities, I'm guessing virtually every industry out there has applications, whether they know it or not. There's many opportunities to introduce this technology. So as you say, the channel's got a big opportunity. Yeah, I guess some of their business people will knock on the door and say, we need this, but they've also got a major opportunity to go out there with a message that, you know, here's all this technology, here are all these solutions to help you, you know, whether it's digital transformation, however they choose to phrase it, help, you know, their customers improve their business.
Yeah. Every single one of the guys that we sign up has got one of these deals in them. And I would say every single channel, company, reseller, MSP, specialist has got at least one really big deal in there. And it's for us to help you at least identify them, and where we can to help you to close them. The other thing is that we are staunchly channel only. We don't have any direct customers at all. And there's always a concern when you're dealing with a company that does a bit of both, that suddenly your deal will appear on their direct prospect list, and you know, so usually it says, oh well, you know, we were talking to them already, and then you've lost it. So I think people tend to trust Jola, and we're the same team that used to run Griffin Internet, and we are famous for our sort of channel only position, and that's continued with Jola. So I think people can trust us. We're never ever going to, you know, compete against our partners, and it helps to know that, because it means you can engage us directly with the end user without them trying to disintermediate the reseller, because we, you know, and that does occasionally happen. You'll occasionally get a call from someone say, oh, we want to call with one of your guys and let's just deal direct. And that's just, we don't want to do that, but we don't have the capability to do that either deliberately. We are only set up to deal with resellers and MSPs. So it's important that they understand that.
It's brilliant. It's been great to chat to you. We covered a lot, and thanks very much indeed for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks for inviting us.